Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, to secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Another crazy week in America, but here we are, and we're going to be looking at some pretty crazy stuff because we're going to be examining conspiracy theories throughout time, throughout history, how they came into being, how they originated, how they caught on, and some of the effects that they have. And in my mind, somebody once said, those who do not learn their history are doomed to repeat it. So I think we can always, as we do here on Night Vision, take a look at the past and actually inform the present and maybe our future. So tonight I've got a great guest, but before I introduce him, a conspiracy theory is a belief that some covert but influential organization is responsible for a circumstance or event. So certainly we all know there are conspiracies. We're all well aware there's conspiracies of all kinds. But sometimes conspiracy theories, I think, can run a little amok. And that's why I have called on the best expert I know on conspiracy theories, and that is my friend, journalist and author Jonathan Vankin. Jonathan Vankin is an award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in such publications as the New York Times Magazine, Wired, and Salon in a career spanning more than 3 decades. I didn't know you were that old. He is also the author of 3 nonfiction books, including the Amazon.com political bestseller, The 50 Greatest Conspiracies of All Time, and Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes. The first journalistic exploration of conspiracy culture in America. Ooh, that's pretty timely. Jonathan's body of work ranges from investigative reports exposing government corruption to in-depth profiles of athletes and entertainers. He's won awards for sports writing, crime reporting, and for his investigation into irregularities in our election system, another hot topic. But Jonathan has another life in which he writes comic books, TV, screenplays, and even the book for a hit off-Broadway musical. That was the musical about Dusty Springfield, I think, Dusty. It was called, very, very popular. His new book, Close to Zero, How Donald Trump Fulfilled His Apocalyptic Vision and Paid His Debt to Putin with a Devastating Biological Warfare Attack on America, will be published in the spring. Now, we're going to ask, at the last part of the show, in the last hour, we're going to twist Jonathan's arm a little bit to hopefully give us a little bit of a preview of the new book. But first, let's take a look into the past with Jonathan. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hello. Good to talk to you, Renee. I haven't talked to you in quite some time.
I know. I was trying to think back on what it was that, where our first contact was. And I believe it was on Strange Universe in about 1996.
Got to be Strange Universe. Yep.
Yeah. And I think you had just come out with 50 Greatest Conspiracies of All Time.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Either the 50 or the 60 or something like that. But there was a, that greatest conspiracies thing seemed to go on and on and on. There was five volumes of it. I know.
Well, there kept being more conspiracies to add in there.
I guess so. Yeah.
But the thing was too, I was talking with my colleague, from KJRA here, Carl, a little while ago. And I was thinking, I have some vague memory of working with you on something to do with the curse of the Kennedys. Is that possible? The curse of the Kennedy family? I
don't remember that.
It seems like there was something to do with that on Strange Universe, but that's been a long time ago.
Yeah.
And of course, we had a brief run-in when we were working on that Michael Jackson
Yes.
project.
I
And
know. What an
I've got to ask
interesting
you off
project
air.
that was.
Yeah, that's so weird. I've
I
got to ask
know.
you off air some questions about that because that was some pretty wild allegations that Latoya Jackson's ex-husband Jack Gordon was making, not only against the Jacksons but against major record executives and people like this. Some pretty alarming and over-the-top stuff that I who knows if it's true, or maybe who really cares. But
Yeah.
anyway, conspiracies, of course, are at the top of everything today. And it seems to me like back around that time when we first connected, back in the mid 90s, it seems to me like at that time was when I noticed that there was a lot of conspiracy theories that seemed to kind of run amok. And that did seem to be very extreme. And I have to say, the biggest example that I can think of off the top of my head from that time period was David Icke and his reptilian theories. And it just seemed like people started, and I'm not criticizing anyone because I do believe that we're all susceptible to all kinds of things. And I'm not immune. But I do believe it seems like a lot of people went off the deep end with that and started thinking everyone was a reptilian, and certainly people that didn't agree with whatever point of view they were espousing was a reptilian and things like that. And how do you think it is that conspiracy theories that seem so outlandish can end up catching on?
Well, I think around that time that we're talking about, which is probably, 95, 6, 7, 8, that time period, what you had happening was the real sudden explosion of the internet. And that, I think, is what really made a paradigm shift in the world of conspiracy theorizing. And I remember back then, my collaborator, John Whalen, and I wrote a piece for Salon, the online magazine Salon, this was in 1997, about the conspiracy theories surrounding the death of Princess Diana, and who, of course, had, just died in a car accident. And what we wrote about and what we had noticed was that, and of course, back then, the internet really, it wasn't what it is today. There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no.
I think I was using Metacrawler about that time.
Yeah, it was stuff like that, and the main thing that would pass as social media was this thing called the Usenet, and
right.
I don't
know
bulletin
if you remember boards that. And that
it was
sort
basically
of thing.
basically bulletin boards, and the Usenet was like kind of a separate entity on the internet from the World Wide Web. It was basically just hundreds and hundreds of message boards, but people use them sort of the way people use Twitter and message boards like Reddit, and of course the more sort of shadowy ones like 4chan and 8chan and that thing. They use the Usenet for all that stuff. So we noticed, and we found in our little investigation, that it was the time it took for the conspiracy theories of Diana's, or surrounding Diana's death, that it was the result of some conspiracy and that some intelligence agencies had her killed or something. I mean, it literally was maybe within minutes, maybe even 1 minute of the initial news reports of this tragedy happening. And
the theories were already out there.
They're out there on the Usenet, literally instantly. So, this was a big difference from the types of things that I had written about and John and I had written about previously, which were often theories that took years to develop. I mean, you look really the first big conspiracy theories about the Kennedy assassination, the JFK assassination, cropped up in, I think it was probably a couple years later, maybe 2 or 3 years after the event. When Mark, I forget his name. I famous lawyer. For some reason, his name's escaping right now. Wrote a book called Rush to Judgment.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah, and that was really the first sort of conspiracy theory to be published, questioning the findings of the Warren Commission. But anyway, the bottom line is it took years. and it took a lot of research. And these things are actually the products of a real process, a real sort of intellectual process of research and trying to piece things together. You can do that in 2 or 3 years. You can do that in months. You can't do that in less than a minute. You can't do that in mere minutes. So this is what really happened, I think, and that the speed with which information can now be disseminated, and even back then in the 90s could be disseminated, just sort of overtook the process, and it became a game, really. It just became a game. It didn't become sort of a serious thing, because when I look at before that, through the 60s and 70s and 80s, when you had these sort of interesting conspiracy theories about whatever it was, whether it's assassination or Iran-Contra or whatever, a lot of these ideas may or may not have been true, and a lot of them may have been things that people sort of came to weird conclusions on, but it was always based on something. It was always based on their reading, their research, they're really looking into things, and in some cases maybe coming up with ideas that had some validity, or at least a little bit, or could point you in a certain direction where you might be able to find things that you wouldn't have found without otherwise. But then it's somehow just the raw speed with which information could travel around the world just really overtook that process, and the seductive allure of believing this this type of thing became stronger than the will to actually
think critically.
Think critically, exactly. Think critically, do research, and come up with these ideas of, quote unquote, what really happened about any particular event, which I think a lot of the previous people I had written about in my books, in my first book, the Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes book, the people in there would really devote a lot of time and energy to coming up with this stuff based on a lot of research. Again, doesn't mean they were right, doesn't mean that I endorse all those theories necessarily, but there was a certain validity to them in that a lot of work and a lot of effort went into it. That's not true anymore. And that became the case with I think the Diana one was probably the first one, the first big conspiracy theory of the internet age. And then, then it just sort of snowballed from there to where we are now, where, I think when you have these types of things, which initially, due to the speed of the dissemination of information, could short circuit the rational process, and now that becomes easily manipulated by people in power to use these things as propaganda, and that's what we see now, and that's what we see today, I think, sadly.
Yeah, I guess it's not really any different than it was before. I think there've always been, conspiracy theories, some rightly, some wrongly, but I think it is the mass proliferation, just the echoing over and over of these conspiracy theories. That's the difference today.
Well, yeah, I think that's one difference, but I think, to be honest, I don't even really use the word theories anymore in terms of when you're talking about some of the stuff that we're seeing.
Right, because they're
today.
Not really theories.
Yeah, it's like, to me, if something is a theory, it means that some sort of, some sort of intellectual
thesis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a thesis. There's like an intellectual process that went into it. But like I just said, that intellectual process has been completely bypassed due to the incredible efficiency with which the internet can get information to people. And it's been, like I say, it's been totally bypassed, totally short-circuited. And once you're short-circuiting the rational process, you're open to being persuaded by things that you're not even supposed to think about. I mean, that's really the nature of propaganda. You're not really supposed to think about it. You're just supposed to absorb it. And I think that's what a lot of these so-called theories are. And that's why I don't even like to use the word theories. They're more like induced delusions, whereas someone out there, for whatever reason, has tried to plant these ideas in your head, and succeeded. And I think that's what we see happening on a mass scale. So you have this sort of induced mass hysteria. And it's propaganda really on a massive scale. I mean, propaganda has been with us obviously for decades and decades, centuries, but the efficiency with which it can be injected into your thought process today, I don't think has ever really been paralleled.
Yeah, I mean, I see a huge correlation. Tell me if you think I'm on the right or wrong track, but I see a huge correlation between these conspiracies and cults.
Yes.
And the same sort of thing that sucks people into a cult can suck them into a conspiracy. And I remember back in college, I had actually was already an adult and had gone back. I was in the corporate world in another incarnation. And I had gone back to take some management classes, and a psychology class was included in that group of classes that I took. And I had to write a term paper, and we were allowed to write anything on any psychological subject that we wanted. And I chose it, but the theme paper had to ask a question and answer it at the end. And my theme paper, this has been a long time ago, but I believe it was cults, seduction, and induction. Who's vulnerable? And the answer at the end of the paper was anyone is vulnerable.
Yes.
Given a certain set of circumstances.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that's a real problem, is that basically anyone, unless your guard is really up and you're really aware of, and really, like we said, thinking critically about the type of information that you're consuming, anyone really is susceptible to this type of propaganda and this type of, seduction or initiation into some sort of cult or cult-like.
Sorry, my headphones just fell off my head. You just blew my headphones off, Jonathan. I don't know what's going on here. But yeah, it's, I think that, like you could be a critical thinking person, but you could be in a vulnerable time of your life. Maybe you just lost your job. Of course, a lot of us are in that position today.
Right.
Or maybe, you're in a huge, financial crush. Maybe something else is going wrong. Maybe you've had the death of a loved one, as so many of us have these days. Yes. And so you're in a vulnerable position. So your critical thinking isn't what it would be normally. So that's why I think that anyone, even a critical thinker, depending on their psychological state of mind and their circumstances at the time, could be vulnerable to accepting something that ordinarily they wouldn't.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, you just have to have your guard up. And, a lot of people don't. And it's a big problem in this country. I mean, it's not just the internet. I was sort of singling that out. But, television, which has been around for a lot longer than the internet, has a similar effect. And just mass media in general, and this sort of total inundation point that we reached with our mass media, not even before the internet, I think, when we just sort of live in this 24-hour media consumption society, it makes it really hard to take a step back and think about things. Sometimes you have to read books and stuff like that, or go to the library, and you have to be able to filter your own information, select it carefully and evaluate it critically. And that is a skill that I think a lot of people just don't have, and it seems to somehow be deteriorating, even more than it was previously. So, it's something. I know, there's this book that I love about propaganda by this French sociologist named Jacques Ellul, and it's called Propaganda: The Formation of Men's Attitudes. And when he wrote it, I think you would always use the word men for these types of things, but it could obviously applies to all people. Mm-hmm. Written in the 50s or early 60s, I think. And he talked about how for propaganda to be effective, And to really work, it has to be total. And, so that was his concept, was that we sort of live in this society of total propaganda, 24 hours a day. There's no escaping from it. And I think he was very prophetic, because we have really got there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you could apply this to, Nazi Germany, because the people, many people really did kind of get sucked into that thing, and also into this idea of a master race and being against other races. I mean, I know a lot of German people were not, but certainly enough got pulled into that. I mean, do you see that as a conspiracy theory?
See, what do you mean specifically as a conspiracy?
I mean, how the Nazis were pushing the, white supremacy thing and the master race thing. I mean, more of a propaganda thing, I guess.
Well, again, it was propaganda, but it was very, conspiratorial. I mean,
very pointed. Yeah.
I mean, they certainly, notoriously adopted and promulgated things like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Hitler was a big fan of Henry Ford, the same Henry Ford who founded the Ford Motor Company, who was also quite a prolific and notorious anti-Semite, who wrote a famous book called The International Jew, which was basically a book about, a book accusing Jews of being part of this worldwide conspiracy. Unfortunately, that is an idea that has had way too much. I mean, any is too much.
Oh boy,
but
it's got a lot much.
Yeah, and it still exists today. I mean, really, I think this QAnon thing is really just a variation on that. And you even hear it today, this very day. I mean, was it today or yesterday when you heard this thing about this woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, this insane congresswoman who had this idea that the California wildfires were caused by space lasers that were controlled by Jews. I mean, it's just like, what on earth is going on? I mean, but this, this idea still exists. This horrible idea that led to this, it's unspeakable genocide. It still exists and is now seems to be getting mainstreamed once again in our society here. And it's frightening, it's very scary.
It is. It really is. Too, it's like they kind of like pick up on some of these old tropes and work them into a new, even weirder trope to put out. But what do you think, or do you have any ideas, and have you done research? I haven't gotten through your manuscript yet. What I've read is killer. But did you do a lot of research into the QAnon conspiracy? And
not so much for this book, but I I've done
for the next one.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've done enough to know what it's about, and it's it's
I was
again,
just wondering
it's not
if you had,
I don't really consider it a theory. It's propaganda, and it's a belief system. It's almost like a religious belief system of, hatred, I guess you'd say. I mean, that's really what is motivating this type of thing. So, and why so many people fell for this? Well, I mean, why do people fall for these things in general? I think, like you say, they're not thinking critically, and often I think too that they, it plays to people's inherent biases.
Sure.
I mean, if you're already somebody who is whatever, a white supremacist or whatever, I mean, when something like this crazy theory comes along, it kind of makes sense to you in some weird way. And that's really dangerous.
Yeah. The reason I was asking you about QAnon was because I just wondered whether you had any theories about, who originated that, what was the genesis of that, and who you think's behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but there was certainly been a couple of suspects. There was one guy whose name is, again, escaped me right now, who I guess was ran one of the message boards that this thing's originated on. And I think a number of people have suspected him of being so-called Q posting these things. You know, I mean, all I know is that it's not real. It's ridiculous. But yet so many people seem to have completely suckered for it. And it's become almost now like sort of a generic brand where there's just a wide range of almost anything, like anything that comes along. There's some explanation, some crazy explanation for that they all seem to fit into these preconceived genres too. You know, this one's a false flag. And this is just these things you keep hearing again and again and again and again and again without anybody thinking about what they're about.
I mean, I remember, and this has been probably 2 or 3 years ago at least, but I was at a friend's house and her brother was there, you know, like a 50-year-old guy, and he buys into a lot of this stuff, and he kept going on and on about how, you know, the Sandy Hook school shooting was a false flag operation. And I go, okay, think about what you're saying. You know, for one thing, I actually know someone in Connecticut who knew one of the families. So did that family have a baby just to then hide it somewhere and say it got shot and killed at Sandy? I mean, these kids really existed and they're not here anymore. And now they're doing the same thing with the Parkland. Only, you know, I don't know if they're saying that was, you know, paid for by, you know, the regular George Soros thing. And it wasn't, you know, what it appeared to be.
Yeah. And again, you know, George Soros is just a key. It's just just means Jews, really.
It's a buzzword. It's a
buzzword. Yeah. And you know, it used to be the Rothschilds, and now it's George Soros. It's just a way of saying it's the same old, you know, anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that's existed for centuries, decades, centuries, but just sort of repackaged to be a little more marketable in our current climate. That's really all it is. So, you know, and I just feel just terrible for the families of people who've gone through this, and obviously for the victims that they have to be, you know, they have to be subjected to this sort of thing, this sort of horrendous slander and libel, really. And you know, at the same time, you've got people in rather prominent positions in the media who don't seem to care about the truth or the facts or anybody's feelings about them, and just, you know, we'll just talk about these things and disseminate them as if they're actually true and as if there's actually something worth talking about. And it's not. It's just a way of getting people to think. You know, this is what I've been thinking really lately, is that, you know, when I first started writing about these things, it was a while ago, you know, shortly before we did Strange Universe. Mm-hmm. Not that long before, but a few years before that. And to me, at that time, it seemed like this type of thing, conspiracy theory, was, even if they weren't all true or whatever, I really found some value in it, because it seemed to me like a way of speaking truth to power. Like, we're going to look into the facts, and we're going to be looking for what's, you know, what you're not telling us,
right,
you powerful people. But now I think what they're calling conspiracy theories, which there is a negative stigma attached to that. I mean, I think now it's not speaking truth to power. It's power trying to erase truth and dominate the people. You know, it's become completely reversed.
But the weird thing about it is
tools of power as opposed to, you know, opponents of power.
But the weird thing about that is that people see it as the opposite. I mean, people that, you know, have bought in, they see it, you know, as the other side is trying to control the people.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, you were talking earlier about cults. I think that is a characteristic. I'm not a cult expert, but if there's someone out there listening, they should weigh in, because to me it seems like this is a characteristic of cults in general, which is this mindset of a conspiratorial mindset, where you in the cult, and certainly the leader of the cult, whatever it happens to be, is always the victim, is always being oppressed. There's always
Yeah.
The rest of society is out to get him or her. And it creates this mentality of exclusivity where you're in the cult. So you're the ones who have the real truth. You know what's really going on. And everyone else is trying to get you. Everyone's trying to just get you. And that, I think, is where this type of what I call the induced delusions, the conspiratorial thinking, comes in and acts as a very powerful propaganda, or you could even say mind control technique. So yeah, of course you want to believe that you're the one being oppressed. You're the one who's fighting the good fight. You're the one who's fighting against the power structure. But in fact, you are the power structure. And, and cults in general, when they become too big, they become the power structure. I mean, fascism really is just cults writ large. I mean, Hitler was a cult leader. Mussolini was a cult leader. So that's really what we're talking about. I mean, the mentality, I think, to me, of fascism and cultism is the same.
In all your research into conspiracies, did you go way back in time ever? Are there any examples of ancient conspiracies that, and obviously, like I said, there are real conspiracies. So, but was there ever, in those older times, I guess it was hard to get the word out, but, examples of where someone, used the influence, I guess the church maybe, to control people, to get them to do their bidding. Is this just human nature?
I think, yeah, it's sort of inherent in the nature of religions, cults, everything. I mean, there's always got to be this sort of bunker mentality in so many, and not all, I wouldn't say all religion, but the types of religions that rely on sort of centralized authority structures. There has to be some sense that you're under attack. I mean, you see it even today with kind of fundamentalist Christianity, where you're constantly hearing how, it's really Christians who are being oppressed in this country, and or white men are somehow under attack. I mean, it's always the people who seem to be in power who are claiming that they are not in power. It's just a more powerful way of persuading.
I mean, to be fair, there probably are a lot of people out there that do feel powerless right now, because of any number of things. Obviously unemployment hasn't been the greatest in our country, and especially now for the past year during this pandemic. So there probably are a lot of people that feel like, the world is against them, and, the government's against them, and different things like that. But you're right. In fact, the people that are behind those people are the ones that are really in power.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah.
To me, they're the deep state. But it's always the truth hides behind its opposite. Always, it seems like.
Well, yeah, that's what deception is, right? It's like portraying yourself as something that you're not. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do feel powerless, and some people feel powerless because they are powerless, or at least they're in a position where, they don't have the power it's not very easy to exercise the power that they have. But, again, it's a dangerous game. You don't want to give in to this type of dangerous propaganda which basically is encouraging you to direct your feelings of anger at your apparent powerlessness at other people who are also powerless.
Right.
So
right.
that happens a lot.
That's true. But it seems that, things are getting worse on that front, like you said, especially, I guess, because of the internet, although I know social media is cracking down on some of that, hate speech and some of the false statements and things like that, which I think is a good thing. I mean, honest to God, I feel like we need a rest,
Yeah.
just from all the chaos. And, certainly it's anyone's right to support whatever party or candidate that they see fit. But what I wonder is, do the people who back this QAnon stuff, like the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, I noticed a lot of Jesus saves signs and things like that in the crowd as they were, like beating police officers and
Right.
and stampeding over each other and killing each other and everything else. And I wonder if any of the people who may have sort of gone along with these ideas saw any incongruity there, or maybe a congruity there, because I don't understand what the difference is between extremists using Christianity and going under the banner of Jesus than ISIS using Islam.
Well, it's the
Because,
same, right?
any Islamic people that I know don't think, anything like those terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same. I mean, this is any type of religious fundamentalism, I guess you'd call it, or extremism, is basically the same. It's just the window dressing is different, and that's really a problem. I mean, I think there isn't really that much difference between the Taliban and these people who stormed the Capitol. It's really, maybe the Taliban's a bit more organized. That's about the only thing I can think of. It's a difference.
I hate to say it, but that's exactly what I saw. That's exactly my thought. And I'm thinking, how can they do this? It's just crazy. And I do see, to be fair, that I was reading, I think today, that the Southern Baptist Convention, is denouncing that. They're taking some sort of steps in the right direction. I know that there was the African American branch of the Southern Baptist Convention. I guess it's a Black Caucus or something. They were going to leave the Southern Baptist Convention because of the riots and because they weren't standing up against it. And I think that they have and actually taken some sort of action. So, I'm hoping that, religious leaders and others, political leaders that people will listen to will have the courage to just speak the truth.
Well, you would hope so. I mean, I can't say I'm super optimistic about that. It hasn't happened really yet, at least not on a grand scale. And, it does seem like even when that sort of thing does happen, the sort of mass hysteria has just taken such a deep root that it's just rejected. So, as soon as you diverge from the orthodoxy of these crazy beliefs, then you're the crazy one and you need to be expelled. It's kind of wild to me watching like what's going on with this Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney, and she's from Wyoming. And of course, she was one of the 10 Republicans in the House who voted to impeach, Donald Trump. And now they are just trying to
get rid
of her completely. And, she's one of the most right-wing politicians in the that you can even imagine.
She really is. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like that. It's like their beliefs don't even matter. I mean, you'd think they'd look at her and go, "Oh, well, this is someone who believes what I believe about all this stuff, and I should listen to her." But no, it's again, it becomes this sort of cult mentality where you go against the leader. You show disloyalty to the leader, and that's what's really important. So that's what she's being targeted for, not her beliefs, which are basically the same as all the rest of these people on the right or the far right.
Right.
But she just she didn't show appropriate loyalty to the cult leader, really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's hard it's hard for me to understand, but I'm trying to, And Liz Cheney, I certainly don't agree with her on a lot of things, but I do have a lot of respect for her. And that was before the vote. That didn't change the way that I saw her one way or the other. I thought it was pretty courageous, but I already saw her as someone, with a lot of opposing views. But I kind of like the idea of having, two strong parties in Congress to, provide checks and balances on each other. I definitely get that, there's a case to be made a lot of times for a more conservative view on certain things. And I want to hear it. I want to hear it and base my decisions and thoughts on that, but not, just have one party that has one view, like say the Democratic Party, and then another party that's just gone off the rails.
That's the problem. To have these two opposing ideologies and two parties that are sort of struggling with each other and trying to reach a compromise, at least one of them, or both of them really, have to be honestly trying to come to some common ground. But that's just not happening right now. You have one party that would like to do that, and another party that really just wants to completely overthrow the government. And how do you compromise with that? You can't. There's really no common ground at all. You can't make common ground with people who wanted to go in and kill politicians. I mean, it's just there's no middle ground. There's no negotiating. So that's the problem, and that's where we are right now, unfortunately. And I hope it's not always like that, but I don't really see it changing anytime soon, unfortunately.
I wonder, it's like I was thinking, the people that did storm the Capitol, who are really, really caught up in all this. I wonder if there's anything that, as their cases are adjudicated, whether the judge could have them, take psychological counseling or, some kind of deprogramming or something like that, or would that just be fruitless because if people don't really want it themselves, it probably wouldn't work.
Well, I don't know. Again, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but cult deprogramming has worked on cult members in the past. So, something like that should happen. I mean, one thing throughout this whole era that I think we've ignored as a country is the psychology of this whole phenomenon, of when you have someone who it just seems to me to be a mentally ill person running the country. That's a real problem. And it's contagious. Mental illness is contagious. And you can infect other people with your delusions. And when you have the platform that Mr. Trump had, a lot of people get infected. And especially when you consider that, that the Republican Party was moving that direction pretty strongly anyway. I mean, you go back to the whole Tea Party, and you can go back even further than that, and you find a lot of these same tendencies. I look back even, well, you can go back even further than this, but you look at 1988, the presidential campaign that year. George H.W. Bush, of course, was running as a Republican then, and he ran a campaign that was really at the time, one of the most substance-free kind of personal vicious campaigns ever, that was really based mostly on racism and personal attacks and smears against his opponent, if you remember a lot of stuff. So, I mean, that's where it really, I wouldn't say it's where it started, but that was, in a way, to me, the prototype for like the Trump campaign, where it's all about, where he's just going all out with this type of thing. But Bush did it too. And, when he passed away recently, he was sort of heralded as this great sort of icon of decency. And, we wish that this is the way it was now, that this decent honest man, but
1,000 points of light.
1,000 points of light, and a kinder, gentler nation, and all this stuff. But you look at the campaign that he actually ran, and it was just horrendous. It was horrendous. So
I'm embarrassed to say I do not remember, but I think I'm going to take a look back at that just to see.
Yeah, well, you had the Willie Horton ad. Remember that thing?
Oh yes.
And you had Dukakis was a card-carrying member of the ACLU, in Bush's words, whatever that was supposed to mean. Obviously, it was supposed to mean he wasn't really an American. He was some sort of communist. And Kitty Dukakis burned the flag, which never really happened, but that was a smear that his whole campaign was really based on this. It wasn't based on ideas or policies. I mean, the only policies he basically said was, I'm going to not raise your taxes, no new taxes, and basically continuing whatever Reagan's policies were. That's it. That was it. So, to me, that was really the kickoff for this sort of hyper negativity. That's interesting. And you could go back, way further, but I mean, you could look even at when Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House. I mean, he was the same type of thing, where it was really all about not winning an argument with your opponents or trying to persuade voters or the electorate that your policies were better, or maybe conservative economics really does work. And they didn't even try. It was really all about just destroying your ideological opponents, smearing them, and trying to sort of erase them from history. And that's what we're seeing now on a grand scale.
The anger and the hatred is what troubles me, obviously, the most about this whole thing, because I've never seen, people turn on each other the way that they are today. I've never seen such divisiveness. I mean, I was telling off on my age again, as I usually do. I was a kid, in the 60s. And I remember, the civil rights movement and all that stuff going on. But it was still nothing. And maybe it's because all we had then was network news. And it was pretty straight ahead broadcasting. But you just didn't hear, the vitriol and the hatred. And I remember, my parents were lifelong Democrats. And I think our next door neighbors, who were their best friends, were Republican. And we hung out all the time. And maybe there was a good-natured joke every now and then about a candidate, or, you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, so you wouldn't understand, or, something like that. But it was all good-natured and very, there was nothing that said, you're my enemy because you're in a different party. What's up with that?
Well, I think, I think when you go back into that time period, it was more prevalent that you could have this kind of, what's a good word here? I guess collegiality, maybe, or comity between Republicans and Democrats, or between conservatives and liberals. I mean, they could sort of get along. But it wasn't completely that way, because you have to look at things like, look at the Kent State. Remember the Kent State massacre, and I think it was 1970. I mean, there was a lot of people in this country who thought that was great, that those college kids should have been shot and killed. And a lot of people thought that. I don't know if it was a majority view, but it was enough. It was quite a lot. So, this idea that somehow, people who disagree with you ideologically, or who dare to speak up, or dare to oppose the government or whatever, basically are just deserving of death. I mean, this is not a new thing. I mean, in this country, this goes back to then, and even before, and
to remind me and the listeners, the Kent State was the Ohio campus massacre, and they were protesting against the Vietnam War. Was that what it was?
Yeah. Basically protesting against the Vietnam War. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it was specifically against Nixon's bombings of Cambodia. and the sort of secret bombings they were called, and I think the U.S. invasion of Cambodia, and that prompted a huge outbreak of protest across the country and on college campuses, and there was sort of a generalized student strike. There was on a lot of campuses, students went on strike. They refused to go to classes or participate in anything. It was a pretty awful time, and I believe that's what was happening at Kent State. And for some reason, the National Guard was deployed on the Kent State campus, and they just opened fire on.
And I think 4
these
students
kids.
were killed.
Yeah, I think it was either 4 or 5 students were killed, and I think to this day it's not really certain why they suddenly started shooting, but they did. I mean, the students didn't have guns, so they just opened fire on these kids and killed a bunch of them. And I mean, it was met obviously with a great deal of horror, but there was definitely a very, very significant element of the Republican Party in our country and its supporters who thought it was great and thought these kids got what was coming to them.
I don't remember that aspect because I wasn't plugged in. I'll just say that quite yet, into anything of importance.
Right.
So I didn't remember. I remember the shock and horror of it. I remember Crosby, Stills and Nash wrote a song called "4 Dead in Ohio," and
right.
Among everybody that I hung out with, of course, we were appalled by it. But I was probably living in a bubble, so I didn't. And as I said, I didn't have the awareness that I had, a little bit later in my life as I got a little bit more mature. But that's pretty shocking to hear that now, even. But yeah, golly, that's wild. I didn't realize there was any support for it. I thought everybody was appalled by it.
Yeah, no, there definitely was. There definitely was, unfortunately. But I just bring that up just to show that the type of thing we're seeing today is not new. I mean, it's been around in this country for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And American fascism is not new. I mean, even go back to World War II. There's a great dramatic series on HBO, I think it was last year, called The Plot Against America. And if you haven't watched that, it's really worth watching. It's a fictional series, but it's sort of a what-if history.
Mm-hmm.
What-if history about what if Charles Lindbergh had run for president and defeated Franklin Roosevelt in, I guess, 36 or 1940 or something like that.
Wasn't Lindbergh
Lindbergh was
Nazi sympathizer?
He was very much a Nazi sympathizer. Yeah, very much a Nazi sympathizer, and was kind of looked on as a leader of this, what was then called the America First movement. Familiar phrase today.
My goodness.
But then the America First basically meant, the U.S. should not get involved in World War II, and we should just pay attention to ourselves, and that Hitler really was basically an okay guy, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and Lindbergh was looked upon as sort of an icon of that movement. So this show, The Plot Against America on HBO, sort of takes this what-if history approach. Like, what if Lindbergh actually become president? And it's scary,
Yeah. It really is.
Great show, though. Definitely recommend it.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. I don't have HBO. I'm wondering if it's available anywhere else now.
You could probably get it on Amazon or something like that.
Could be. Yeah, I've unplugged. I have unplugged.
Probably smart. Smart.
I mean, I noticed that my kids never watch television. They watch everything online. And the only thing that I was watching on television was the news. And because you couldn't really get it online, you had to be a subscriber of something. But I was in England, I guess it was last fall, fall before last. Yeah, this last year's a total I don't know what, but anyway, so it was the year before last. I was in England visiting a friend, and I found a website where I could watch all the U.S. news stations online. for free. So I said, forget this. Saved myself like $90 a month or something, and just unplugged. And so I do everything on the internet now, which I don't feel I miss a thing.
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing, actually. Kind of do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's where it's headed. I think that's, regrettably in some ways, because, my career has been in television. I think that TV is going to be a, thing of the past as we know it.
Right.
Everything's going digital, and all these networks are now getting their own, sort of OTT platforms to broadcast online and stream and everything else. So I think that's where we're headed. I think it's just about time for us to take our break. And in so doing, I want to remind everybody that you're listening to KGRA. This is Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, Renee Barnett. And my guest tonight is Mr. Conspiracy, Jonathan Vankin. Stay tuned.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. GetTheTea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's GetTheTea.com. GetTheTea.com. The tea that makes you go.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Please listen. Now is not the time to fear. When your immune system is strong, shields up. You have very little worries. If your immune system is compromised, you're susceptible to all viruses. I say shields up and no fear. Try Heart Love from GetTheTea.com. Heart Love has a special ingredient called allicin. It comes from the healing part of the garlic plant. No garlic breath. No garlic leaking out your pores, just pure immune-building ingredients that gets your shields up. Heart Love is a unique blend of herbs that loves to build you up. Google garlic and know the benefits. One Heart Love pill is equal to 20 cloves of garlic. 20 cloves! Shields up. You've heard of our Life Change Cleansing Tea at GetTheTea.com. Now try Heart Love. And by the way, take your blood pressure and watch weekly what happens. So here's how to purchase. Log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com and build your shields. That's GetTheTea.com. Mention Ray in the coupon code and hit apply and receive free shipping.
The Liberator Rocket Heater will heat your home for free. The highly efficient Liberator Rocket Heater has no moving parts. It's safe and strong, constructed of quarter-inch steel. So like all things made in the USA, it's built to last. Uses any kind of wood, sticks, even scrap in its gravity-fed firebox. And it heats workshops, homes, garages, outbuildings, industrial areas, and barns. Watch the video of this blast furnace stove in action. Visit RocketHeater.com. That's RocketHeater.com.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button. So just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, the KGRADB.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Night Vision. Again, I'm your host, Renee Barnett. We're talking with Jonathan Vankin, prolific author and journalist and conspiracy expert. I also would like to inform all the listeners of KGRA and everybody out there, whether you're listening on Spreaker or any of the other formats or platforms, I should say, that Jonathan is going to be joining KGRA with his very own show, and it will be on Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. His show is going to be called Close to Zero, so keep an eye out for that in the coming few weeks, and hopefully not much longer. Actually, when are you starting, Jonathan? Do you know?
I don't think we've come up with an exact date yet, but it's going to be pretty soon. I mean, probably within the next few weeks, I would think. But
right.
But that's my feeling. But yeah, we don't have an exact date, just a time. We have a day and a time, but not a date.
I can't wait to check it out. We're going to be on the same day, and I guess we're going to have the same producer, Mr. Bill Forte.
Yes, very exciting.
I'm
psyched. I'm psyched. It's going to be fun.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're doing it. I think it's going to be a really good addition to KGRA. They're really broadening their programming, so it's very exciting. And adding different kinds of subject matters, different points of view. I think it's wonderful. Anyhow, now I do want to get into. I hesitate to get into it this early because I don't know how much you want to reveal, but I do want to get into your new book, which is coming out. And I guess it's pretty much written, but I think you're vetting and you're doing the bibliography and the footnotes, which I understand are going to be cumbersome, all those footnotes and everything. Yes. But that's great because people can actually source back what you're saying.
Right.
And that's so important. And I mean, I think it's even more important, today, because so many times, especially when we're talking about conspiracies, and people will, come and say, oh, this, that, and the other. And I'll say, oh, well, where did you get that material? Where did you get that idea? And it was always just somebody sent it on the internet or something like that. So it's going to be a real breath of fresh air to have a work that's so well researched and footnoted, and you can kind of rely on it a little bit. It's like you can take it to the bank. He did his due diligence, people. But anyway,
that's the idea. I think we'll talk about it. But basically, my whole idea was to take everything from the public record, and yes, it's my interpretation of it, but there's really nothing in there that is not, that no one else could have accessed. It's all information that is publicly reported, but yet I think a story that hasn't really been told.
Before we get started on that, we have a quick question from the chat room, and Neutron, our old pal Neutron, he's been around for a while. I'm going to try to twist Neutron's arm to come on my show sometime because he's got some great expertise in a couple of areas. Anyway, he's saying, how do we today get rid of the present social negative stigma of the word conspiracy theory, of the words conspiracy theory?
Well,
it's hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do. That's sort of been the eternal question. I think, I think, like I said earlier, I don't even really like to use the word theory anymore with regard to these types of, the QAnon and all this other stuff that you see out there, because it doesn't involve any thinking. In fact,
Right.
it's hard to really buy these things if you do start thinking. Once you start thinking, you kind of realize that this is all really toxic, stuff, and not true, or even close to being true. So I think, I don't know. I think I would rather than the media saying, branding all of these things conspiracy theories, I'd rather they use a more accurate term like, paranoid delusions, or like I said earlier, sort of maybe induced delusions or propaganda or something like that, because that's really what we're talking about here. We're not talking about researched ideas that are, really trying to dig into the real causes behind events and what's really going on and all that sort of thing. I mean, we're not even trying. It's just, they've just become a tool to manipulate people, en masse. So how do you get rid of the stigma? I don't even know. I mean, I wish I had a good answer for Neutron, but I don't even know if there really is an answer right now. I think probably it starts in the mass media or on maybe social media, just trying to get some sort of movement among people online to stop using this term and use something else. I actually saw a post today on Twitter by a guy named Josh Marshall, who has been around a long time. He runs this site called Talking Points Memo, political news site, really good in my opinion. And but he posted on Twitter basically the same idea, like, well, why? It just doesn't seem. It seems like we're giving these types of ideas. It's not accurate, really, to call them theories or conspiracy theories. There's got to be some better terminology, and he didn't really come up with one. But I think it might take something like that, like going on social media and trying to create a trend.
It's almost like conspiracy fantasy.
Well, yeah, exactly. Conspiracy fantasy. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Because it's just, I mean, some of these theories or ideas out here today are literally made up from whole cloth.
Right.
They're just, somebody just says, oh, so-and-so's a reptilian and he's running the country. Well, I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, how do you prove somebody's not a reptile?
I mean, yeah, but it's not even worth trying.
No.
It's something like that is so nonsensical.
It's like, why am I having this conversation?
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I really don't want to offend people. And I'm honestly puzzled by this situation and really disheartened by so much rancor among, the American people. And not just Americans, it's worldwide, but, we're sort of dealing with America, especially in your new book. But it's just it's so disheartening, to hear the hateful comments that are just so easily thrown out there. It's just unbelievable. It's like, when did it become okay to be mean all the time? It just doesn't. I don't get it. I don't get it. And it seems like it would take so much energy to just be angry all the time.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Oh my
gosh. Just constant anger is just exhausting. And, I think really it's like it filters down from the top, as with so many things. I think when it comes through the media and it comes from the president and it comes from, politicians, this whole sort of just this constant anger and hatred and resentment and grievance and victimization or victimhood, I should say, self-victimization. It's like it becomes contagious.
And there's a tacit permission to, to just go for it now. It's like, don't worry about how, you make someone feel, or, whether it's right or wrong, or whether it's mean or nasty. Just, go ahead and say it. It's like we used to kind of be polite to each other. I mean, that used to be the thing, the accepted way to be. And it just seems like that's not the way it is today. Not the way it is today.
Well, that's how I grew up. Was like, that's what my parents always taught me. It was like, be respectful towards people, even if you don't agree with them on things. Try to treat people with a basic kindness and generosity, and just respect for who they are, and that sort of thing. And it's totally all right to disagree, or even to get angry at people sometimes. But it's not right to just sort of carry around an anger. I mean, constant anger is really just hatred. I mean, that's what it is, and that's not helpful for anybody, and it's just not a good thing. So yeah, it'd be nice if we could treat each other better, but that's just not how it's happening right now. And sometimes that in itself, this whole civility, you hear that word a lot, civility, that is used as a propaganda tool, because it seems to often only go one way. I mean, it's hard to be civil to the people who want to stamp you out of existence. How do you be civil to them?
And do you remember when political correctness was not a horrible thing to be? Do you remember?
Yeah,
it's become such a bad word, I mean, and by politically correct, the way I define that is just, don't offend someone on purpose. If you don't have to use a derogatory term, don't use it. That's sort of the way.
Yeah, but now it's often used to mean the opposite of that. That like you're being politically correct if you somehow inhibit yourself from saying nasty things.
Like,
about people.
I can't say that because that's not politically correct. It was like, my God.
Right. You hear people even wanting to say horrible things, like, the N-word. It's like, why can't I say that? It's just not politically. Well, there's a reason it's not politically correct. It's not humanly, decently correct. So
and it's hurtful.
And
it's hurtful.
It's damaging. It's hurtful, and it's violent. Really, it's like words can be violent, and that's a very violent word. And we shouldn't be committing violence against one another. That should not be permitted in our society, and we shouldn't be doing it. So, I think. I don't know. I get exasperated by this sometimes and sort of like run out of thoughts.
I know. Well, because we just don't have the answers. We don't have all the answers that we need, because some of these questions, I think there just are no answers for right now. Like, how do we surmount this? How do we, sort of reel people back in, or make them feel okay about stepping away from the delusion? How do we, and how do we not ruin our families and friendships with people that, it's a big problem. It's a big social.
It is. And I think it's going to be just a long process of social evolution. It involves education. It involves communication between parents and kids. It involves the media, the messages we get through the media. I mean, it's just sort of a whole social project, and I don't really know how to change it overnight. And, as one person, all I can do is myself personally just try to use what skills I have, which mainly is to do with writing, and to try to write things that I hope will inform people, or maybe make them see things a different way than they're used to seeing them. And that's, what I've always tried to do, and on some small scale, maybe I've reached a few people. I don't know, or maybe not.
Oh, I bet you've reached a lot more than a few.
Well, I hope so, but it's hard to say. But it's just that whole idea is like that's all I can do, and I think it's all each one of us can do is just try to use whatever gifts and talents we have, even if that talent can just be being a good person. That's a talent, that's a skill, that's something that should not be taken for granted by anyone. Just be a kind person, be a good person, treat your own family well, treat your friends well, treat your strangers well. It's not always easy to do. It really isn't. And if you make a conscious effort to try to do it whenever you can, one by one, little by little, things will start to change and improve. I think.
Well, I definitely want to get into as much as you'd like of your new book, and I'm gonna. Well, you can say the title because somehow I don't have it in front of me anymore. It's called Close to Zero.
Oh, Close to Zero, and the subtitle is very long, so I don't even remember it offhand. But it basically has to do with, really what I wanted to do was tell the story of the pandemic and tell what I think is the real story of the pandemic, which is that it's not exactly original to me, but it did not, we did not have to be as bad as it is. We should not in any way, shape, or form be in the position as a country that we are. And certainly I focused only really on the United States in the book, but I think anywhere in the so-called, Western world has bungled this thing, beyond belief.
Yeah.
But I think here I really came to believe, after doing all this research and reading, that this wasn't just a case of it being bungled by the Trump administration. I think it was deliberate. I mean, I think that this was, and I'm not saying that the virus itself was created deliberately. I'm not saying that at all. I don't think that the pandemic was created by, Donald Trump by any stretch of the imagination. It existed and it would have come here no matter what. But, we did not have to lose 450,000 people, which is probably going to end up being a lot more than that. We did not have to have our lives disrupted and turned upside down for a full year, which is going to end up being more than a full year. Mm-hmm. It just didn't really have to be that way. And you look at some other countries that have handled it correctly, New Zealand being one, Australia another, some of the Asian countries. Mm-hmm. It's just been a lot better. So It's not as if it's impossible. And nor is it the case that how to deal with pandemics was some sort of weird mystery. It wasn't at all. But what we saw from the top in our country was a very deliberate neglect of doing the basic things. And of course, we saw also this unbelievably just mind-numbing stream of lies coming primarily from Trump himself and from those around him, telling us all the things that we've heard a million times. And the title of the book, Close to Zero, comes from a statement he made, I think it was in February of last year, where, he said,
we've got 15 cases.
Yeah. And they're going to be close, and pretty soon they'll be close to zero. It's just an absurd statement at the time, but it was just repeated over and over again.
In retrospect, it's hideous.
It's hideous. But even at the time, even if we didn't think it was going to be this bad, we knew, any rational person who knew anything about this knew it was going to be a lot worse than that. This thing was not going away. And then, the constant repetition of this is just going to disappear. It's going to be like a miracle with the warm weather. It'll go away. I mean, all this nonsense that as has since been quite well documented, especially in the Bob Woodward book. I mean, Trump knew himself to be untrue. So, he was very aware of what was going on and how bad this thing was. But he decided to go the other way.
The whole mask thing, I guess that definitely supports your idea, because he obviously that administration, poo-pooed mask wearing, and in fact, it became like a political statement for people, and it's mind-boggling. Why that would be political?
Again, I think it goes back to what
like,
we're talking about.
I'm going to protect myself. That first thing, okay? And I don't see anything political about that. And, and certainly I'm going to try to protect the people that I come into contact with. So, I've had my first jab. I was fortunate enough to luck into getting, the vaccine. So I'm going to get my second one on February 9th. But even after that, I'm definitely going to wear a mask when I go out, because what it means is I'm not going to get really sick and die, hopefully, from COVID, but I could still be carrying it. So out of respect for my fellow humans, I'm going to still wear a mask. And I just don't understand it. I really don't.
Well, I think
I mean, there's tons of YouTube videos, called Karens in the Wild. I don't know if you've seen them.
Oh, yeah. No, I talk a little bit about that in the book, actually.
But most of them have to do with masks.
Almost all of them have to do with someone, there's like a genre of these things. Someone's in a grocery store or some other, usually indoor public place, a coffee shop, refusing to wear a mask. The employees, usually very reasonably, are saying, look, could you please put on a mask or leave? That's our policy. And this person throws a fit.
And calls the police.
Yeah. But what I talked about in the book was that I feel that even those videos, even though I think a lot of us, myself included, look at them and just get sort of exasperated, or, they're sort of almost funny in the way that how could these people be so stupid and obnoxious? I think really what they were doing was they were also acting as a form of propaganda by putting out this, by the repetition.
Showing people what to do, I guess.
Showing people what to do and creating this general idea that somehow there is a legitimate debate, that somehow it's like it's two sides of a story, that somehow there's one side of these people who don't want to wear a mask and there's another side of people who say you should wear masks, and like this is something that's legitimate, whereas it's not legitimate. I mean, the fact is that in this unfortunate pandemic situation, it's what you have to do, especially indoors, especially around other people. So it's just what you have to do. It's the same way you can't drive your car without brakes.
Or a seatbelt.
Or a seatbelt. It's
we
the
used
same
to
thing.
not have to wear seatbelts, and then we did, and people did complain and all that. But then it caught on. Yeah. I remember when I was a little girl, we didn't have seatbelts in cars, and I remember when they came out, and I thought, "Wow, this is weird," But it wasn't long before everybody just did it, and of course now you don't think twice about it.
Yeah, of course.
And it's a law. You can even, get a ticket or, possibly be arrested for not obeying that law. So why isn't that an infringement on our rights? Why isn't that political? What's the difference?
Well, I mean, it's become much more accepted, but I remember, I'm old enough to remember that when, even that was a debate for a while before they even had the seatbelt laws. I mean, I remember people saying all the time, this is probably going back to when I was a kid, really, but people saying all the time, like, oh, actually, I don't wear a seatbelt because it's actually more dangerous to wear a seatbelt.
Right.
And, what if you're stuck in a car and you can't get your seatbelt? It's like,
yeah,
it's just these ridiculous, these ridiculous things that you sort of hear echoed today in the masking thing, that like, the masking, you're going to be breathing in carbon dioxide and it's going to make yourself sick. And
sort of like Gary Busey used to be about motorcycle helmets before.
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, I have a right not to wear a helmet. And it's like, no.
And then he had a horrific brain injury.
Right. And
but
yeah, I mean, wearing motorcycle helmets, it's the same thing too, especially on a motorcycle where, again, it's not just you. I mean, if you, are on a motorcycle and it doesn't take much for a motorcycle to have an accident, and if you're not wearing a helmet, you hit your head and die. Well, that's awful. It's awful for you, but it's also awful for the person who completely accidentally might have caused the accident, who's driving a car, and suddenly they've killed somebody. And who wants to walk around with that for the rest of your life? Not to mention the financial elements that come in with any type of an accident like that. It's just a horrible thing. So that's another reason why you need to wear a helmet. And it's the same thing with the mask, really. It's just, we're trying to get over this. And the thing that was really bizarre was like the same people, the same anti-mask people were also the same people who were like, we have to open everything up, open up the economy, open up the restaurants, open up the schools, but they don't want to wear masks. But the fact is, if we really had universal masking, people wearing masks, almost everyone wearing them, we could start opening things up better. I mean, maybe even restaurants could be open if we knew that people were going to diligently follow the rules of masking and social distancing. These sort of what they call the non-pharmaceutical interventions that are pretty basic stuff, but which definitely reduce the spread of the disease. So, our economy would be doing much better if only people just followed some basic rules.
And the thing of it is too, I mean, with, 400,000 people dead, or 450, whatever it is now. It's just unbelievable. It's hard to think that there's almost anyone around who doesn't know someone who's either suffering with COVID or has had a bad time with it, or who's lost someone or knows someone who's lost someone.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many dead people. And, it's just, I don't know, it's unfathomable to me. And to me, it just doesn't make any sense to put a political spin on it at all.
Well, like I say, I think it goes back to what we were talking about in the last hour, that we're talking about a cult. And if you wear a mask, you're showing disloyalty to the cult and the cult leader. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to. It's like it's that symbol. And you're somehow, you're also not even supposed to believe that this disease is real, and that it's either exaggerated or maybe just a complete hoax. Again, it's all part of these same conspiracy fantasies or delusions that we were talking about previously, that people are just subscribed to these completely irrational, outrageous ideas, and it's causing real damage. I mean, it's causing people to lose their lives as well as their livelihoods. I mean, and their health and everything else. So it's so disappointing. It's one of the most disappointing things I think I've seen, maybe the most disappointing thing I've seen in this country in my entire life. To see such a huge percentage of the people in this country just simply not only not caring about their fellow human beings,
or about themselves,
or even about themselves, but sort of actively out there trying to hurt each other. And it came from the top. And that's really what my book is about. It's about this effort to actively kill Americans. And I feel like that's what I've been trying to document through all these public sources that I cite in the book.
What is your theory behind why he would want to do that? Is it because many of the communities hardest hit by the pandemic are communities of color?
I think that's part of it, but I think originally, some of it goes back to his own personal belief system. And I have a whole chapter about this in the book. Donald Trump was a man who believes that when society collapses, he benefits. And he's stated this on numerous occasions. And that's why in the subtitle of the book, I talk about his apocalyptic vision. He kind of does have an apocalyptic vision, not so much in a religious sense, but in the sense that he really believes and has said so, that when things all go to hell, that he'll come out the winner. And I think that probably had something to do with it too. That the way to make America great again is to sort of burn it to the ground, and he'll be fine, and he'll probably do better, and his friends will do better if he has any actual friends. And I think that's part of it. I think another part too, and I talk about this a lot in the book, and it's impossible to come to a definitive conclusion because all these things are still secret. But the number of times that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone during this crisis alone, not to mention during his entire 4 years, but during this crisis, was really incredible, including a call that happened on December 29th, where Trump was on the golf course in Florida and Putin called him on his cell phone. And we still to this day don't really know what they talked about. And, the word from the Kremlin was that it had something to do with like a terrorist plot or something like that the U.S. had helped with. Like, it was something like that. But we don't really know what they talked about. Well, December 29th was just 2 days before the Chinese finally announced to the world that this thing was real, that there was this new strain of a coronavirus that was causing this devastating respiratory ailment and killing a lot of people. And, so if it happened just 2 days after this phone call, well, we know that our intelligence services knew about it. And if our intelligence services knew about it, certainly the Russians knew about it, because they have a 2,400-mile border with China, and they are, sort of extreme geopolitical rivals with China. So I would guess that Putin and his intelligence services know everything that's going on inside of China, and he knew about this ahead of time. So what did they say in that conversation? That one in particular, and then there was 9 more, or maybe 8 more, for 9 total. Between then and I think it was like the end of, like maybe July. It's all in the book.
Your subtitle. I'm going to give the title out again because we've had a request from the chat room to have the title read out. It's Close to Zero: How Donald Trump Fulfilled His Apocalyptic Vision and Paid His Debt to Putin with a Devastating Biological Warfare Attack on America.
Yeah.
Now, was
hopefully
the
it'll be out in
debt,
about a month, I'm hoping.
Oh, cool. Was the debt the election? For the election, or was it something else?
I mean, to me, I think that's the most obvious thing, right? But
that's the first thing that popped into my head.
I think it's the most obvious thing. Now, maybe there's other things too, but we've heard for 4 years. Well, what does Putin have on him? What does Trump owe him? Well, we know what he owes him. I mean, it's right out there. It's been right out there in public since before the 2016 election. We knew that. It's extremely well documented, as much as certain elements try to deny it, like they try to deny a lot of other things, but it's been extremely well documented that
it probably has nothing to do with golden showers then.
Well, it might have something to do with compromat as well. You never know, as they call it, compromising stuff. But I never really. I mean, look, that might actually be a real thing. I don't know. I couldn't know for sure. But I don't even really worry. I wonder, I should say, if Trump would really even care about that ultimately. I mean,
right.
It would be a little embarrassing, I'm
he
sure.
He wouldn't like it, but yeah,
I don't think it would be. But would it really cost him anything? No. I think that's been pretty well established.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think there was that quid pro quo, and also, with the election, and I think also just going back to. I talk about this a little bit in the book. There's also a number of other good books that talk about it. So I didn't, my book is not about the Trump-Russia affair, though it does, of course, talk about it. But there's a lot of other great books that do go into tremendous depth on that. And we know that his involvement with Russia goes way back to the days of the Soviet Union, back to 1987 or even before that, maybe even to the 70s. When he bought, he had the early 80s, I think it was actually, when he had purchased this sort of decrepit hotel across from Grand Central Station and turned it into the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was sort of the first big real estate triumph of his career that really put him on the map. And he purchased for the rooms 200 TV sets, televisions, and he bought them for some reason from this electronics supply store in New York City that was run by a guy who worked for the KGB. And why did he do that? Like, why there, of all places in New York, would he go to sort? So it's all very weird. It's weird stuff. And there's a bunch of other books I'd recommend that people read about that. There's one that just came out recently by Craig Unger, a really great investigative journalist, called American Compromat. He also wrote a book called House of Trump, House of Putin, which is about the same thing. It's a book by a journalist named Luke Harding called Collusion. And, of course, the book called Russian Roulette by David Korn.
Yeah.
Michael Liskov. All those things are books that people should read because they're really fascinating. They document all this in great detail. And I cite some of them in my book. But again, in my book, I'm talking mainly about the pandemic. I don't want to go into the whole history of the, Trump's involvement with Russia. But I think it does play a part in this. And there was just so many things throughout his presidency where it just seemed like he was doing what was in the best interest of the Russian government, not our government. So why would this be any different? And he did so many things that were deliberate. And the whole idea with the pandemic that you always heard was that, he botched it, he bungled it, he was too slow to react, he was distracted, as if it was a giant accident. But there were so many other things that happened that I talk about in the book also that weren't accidents, that no one says were accidents. When then the latest one would be this Capitol riot, which clearly was not an accident. So,
also, I mean, not that he could have known it, or maybe he could have at this time. But when he first got into the White House, he eliminated, the pandemic response team. There was a committee that was set up to address, these biological issues, which we've known for many decades were coming down the pike. I remember when, at Strange Universe, probably around 1996, 97, doing a segment on killer viruses and how this was going to be the coming threat, and so it's like, and it was written by a doctor and a scientist. I mean, we've known that these threats, these biological threats, have been out there. We know that we're going to confront them at some point or another. So that seemed very odd that he would eliminate that part of the government.
Well, yeah, and I have again, there's a whole chapter about this in my book, Close to Zero, so repeat the title. I have a whole chapter about that, which is about before the pandemic happened, what happened in that administration. And I talk about how he dismantled this pandemic response unit of the National Security Council. And even before that, I mean, the U.S. had a scientist in China working with the Chinese version of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. And that person's job was to not only aid in research, but also to monitor any coming pandemics, any diseases or viruses that cropped up there, because a number of these things have come out of China because it's such a big country, and they do things like have these wet markets and that sort of thing that
huge population.
Huge population.
Crowded.
It's conducive. It's very crowded. So it's very conducive to new viruses sort of making the leap from animals to humans and then spreading. So we had a person there whose job it was to monitor these things. And one of the first things that the Trump administration did was remove her. So we had nobody there to keep an eye on it. But at the same time, we had intelligence reports and our own intelligence agencies keeping an eye on it, and who knew that there was something really weird going on over there. So, and this we're talking about like November of 2019 and December of 2019. So it's the type of thing that just makes you wonder. It's like, well, why, all this information was there. And look, we know that Donald Trump was not a big reader, and they didn't really pay attention to a lot of, didn't really read a lot of these intelligence reports, but they definitely came to him. It's just not plausible to me that no one told him about this stuff. And he even talked about it in his interviews with Bob Woodward.
Yeah.
So he was very aware of it all, as I mentioned earlier. So this is really the central question. And to me, it's like I just looked at, like you were talking about, I mean, just constantly looking through every publicly available source that I could find, and I just don't find any evidence that he did or wanted to do anything to make this situation better. And if anything, he wanted to make it worse, and that's what happened. So, that's really what my book is trying to document, and just, trying to get people to look at it a different way with the ultimate aim of trying to prevent this from happening again. Again, I talked about what I can do in my own tiny, small way as a person, which is just to write about these things and to try to put the evidence out there that I can find and put my arguments out there that I can, that I have arrived at, and hopefully, try to raise some degree of awareness to prevent this from happening again. If, God forbid, we get in a situation where we have a president who doesn't seem to care about these things, maybe there'll be a little more tighter controls, more monitoring, more just something so that we don't.
Yeah, no matter which party the president is from, I don't want any president, to be able to go off the rails. It's just, it's scary as hell, and I don't know. It's like, when he was doing his campaign, he said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and get away with it. Well,
I think that's been proven true.
I think it has, and that's why I wonder whether anything, will get through to people. I don't know how people are going to, open their minds, and I'm sure they would say the same, about me. It's like you're the one that doesn't know what's going on, and that sort of thing. But gosh, it's
well,
just
again, that's why in my book, that's why, and in all the books I've written, that's why it was so important to me to have sources and have publicly available sources. I didn't do this book as a quote unquote investigative reporter. I didn't have access to any information that anyone didn't have access to. I mean, every bit of everything in here, there's URLs.
Anybody could find it if they really wanted to.
Anyone could look through this and try to piece it together the way that I did. So, ultimately the goal is to document all this stuff, to have what I think is a fairly definitive history of the administration's response to the pandemic, which I haven't seen anyone do yet, really. I mean, there hasn't really been a comprehensive book about it yet, because it's still going on. But I want to have that out there so people have that to know this is what really happened. And how do we stop it from happening again? How do we not get in this position where we can be taken advantage of in this way? I mean, why are we in this position? Why have so many people died? Why are we still in this position where, I don't really want to leave my house, if I can
exactly.
afford it. So
I don't leave my house.
Yeah.
But it's so frustrating, but it's, the other thing is it's so complete. The conspiracy is so complete because, I know that you've been been a guest on, major, television news programs as, sort of an expert on conspiracies and things like that. And, so in doing that, let's say, when your book comes out, you're going to be interviewed on CNN or wherever. And
hope so. That'd be great.
I'm betting. And, so, okay, then you become a part of the mainstream media. So anything that you're saying is going to be, nullified immediately. So how do we get around that? I mean, it's like the news can tell the truth and nobody's going to believe them because they've been so poisoned against it. And I do agree that the news is too biased on both sides, to use a familiar term. But, I would like to see more straight news broadcasting, like we used to see more of, less opinion. But, if the news media and journalists in general are the enemy, then how are you going to overcome that hurdle?
Well, I mean, again, I think a lot of it, and just speaking in general terms, has to do with critical thinking and trying to absorb as much information as you can and sort through it. And I realize, it's hard. It's hard to do when we're overwhelmed with information and people are just trying to get by in their daily lives, especially in conditions like we're in now. I mean, you have to realize, like, this type of thing, I mean, just even before the pandemic, but I mean, the way things are now where the economy is so bad and this pandemic is horrible and there's so many other problems, it's like, it's very oppressive. And in a way, it is kind of a tool of power because it makes your daily life so that it's hard to participate. It's hard to really be informed. It's hard to take the time because so many of us are just so worried about getting through today and making it to the next one. And obviously a lot of people right now are not making it to the next one. So, it becomes a situation where it's really difficult, and I totally understand that, to do your reading and actually do real research into things. I mean, I don't even use the word research because it's just it sounds so heavy, but
Sounds so boring. Yeah.
It sounds so boring, right? But I mean, we have so much information out there and so much available online. Just be discriminating, I guess is what I would say. Is for people to be discriminating, not just believe everything they see on Facebook or some other garbage thing like that. There's so many
if you
different
read
sources.
Something, that you're interested in, source it. Go figure out where it came from.
Yeah, and so on. And then just on a personal level, I mean, look, if I have the good luck of getting on some of these major news broadcasts again, as I had done before, back in the day, I can just do myself what I did then, which is just be myself. I mean, I don't really go on there trying to be anybody else or say anything, for effect or just to try to please people or anger people. I've always just gone on there whenever I've done an interview, including this one, and just said what I think and what I feel and what I think is correct based on my belief system and the information that has been at my disposal throughout my life and, in any particular situation. So that's all I can do. And
that is
people are either hate it or love it or don't care. So, but I don't have any control over that. I can just go out there and say what I say.
Yeah. I guess it's up to the rest of us, to get people to read your book who might be resistant.
I mean, I hope a lot of people do. I think if you approach it with even a tiny bit of an open mind, it can be a real eye opener, because I don't think even from the mainstream media that can be very critical of Trump and the pandemic response, I think hasn't really covered it in this way. I think there's been a lot of trying to play it down the middle or making excuses or trying to find other reasons why this is happening, because it's such an incomprehensible and overwhelming thing that's happened. It's hard to understand. And, I certainly wouldn't say I have all the answers, but I think I have a pretty big answer. I think I have a very important answer and one that really needs to be thought about and considered. So, yeah, I definitely hope people listening to the show and elsewhere will go out and look for the book and find that on Amazon or wherever else you can get it and try to absorb it. So that's my hope.
Remind people that the book is not out yet.
Not quite yet.
You're going to go look for it. You're not going to find it. But you're talking about springtime, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at sometime in the spring. I'm hoping within a month. I mean, it's hard to make those deadlines, but I mean, we'll see. But it shouldn't be.
The sooner the better. The sooner the better. But
look,
I know you got to get your.
I wanted to get it out months ago, but that didn't work out either. But I do the best I can.
Yeah.
We're all trying to get through this in our own way.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. I'm as I sit here in my onesie, I didn't even get dressed today. I mean, I'm dressed, but I'm wearing, like a pajama thing.
Yeah.
And I was talking to the kids. I have two college age kids here at the house, and I was, they were just saying, I said, we've got to get busy and do some things. And I realized just this past week, I really think we're all a little depressed. We just kind of lay around and we kind of, like go in our own little rooms and our own little spaces and maybe meet up with each other, at mealtime or something like that. But, and nothing's getting done. I mean, my house looks like a wreck. And I was saying to the kids, I don't know what's going on. And one of them said, Kiki, which is what they call me, Kiki, we're all depressed in this house. Don't you know that? And I said, I think you may be right. I think we may have the COVID, exhaustion or COVID depression. And it kind of, really snuck up on me because I had been actually thinking, as bad as this is, it hasn't been so bad for me. I mean, I've been fortunate in that I have been able to work from home, a considerable amount during the pandemic, doing some big live streaming events with my colleagues over at Dark Zone Productions and things like that. And of course, my radio show. But I think that it started to weigh heavily just the lack of person to person interaction with people.
Yeah. Well, definitely.
I mean, I've got the kids here. Thank God. I think I would go insane. But, it's like gosh, what I wouldn't give, to go sit down with a good friend, over a cup of coffee and have a great conversation, not on
Yeah,
Zoom.
not on Zoom. Yeah, and imagine, I always say, look, I mean, I just say I'm grateful for this technology. I mean, people now are just like to complain about Zoom and all that sort of thing, and
Oh my
I
God.
get it, I get it, but at the same time, what if we didn't have that?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
you'd
Well,
really be isolated.
that's what happened, with the streaming events that we did. The team that I was working with came up with this, brilliant idea of doing these live streaming events. And we did actually, technologically something that had never been done before anywhere. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I'd thought of this. And we did these really interesting things. And I thought, you know what? The one thing that has happened is this pandemic has spurred a lot of creativity. I mean, you see it even on, things like TikTok, with dad and daughter dances and things like that, and people reading their poems, or, I mean, I've gotten hooked on, Chinese shuffle dancing,
Huh.
watching people, it's just so, so pleasant. And people have really, you know, gotten very, very innovative in their, ways to entertain themselves and offer entertainment to other people. So I think it's been good in that way. I think that there are some aspects of broadcasting that probably won't really go back quite the way they were, or I should say production, because we found that we can do it in other ways, easier, cheaper. And maybe you don't have to be right there to interview that person. Maybe you can do it, remotely and that sort of thing. So I think some things that we've developed from this will probably linger on, and we'll appreciate them in the future. But boy, it sure would be nice to get a big old hug from a good friend right about now.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think everybody is missing that, and
It's
it
going to be
is hard.
so exciting when we can all do that again. I'll be so excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, again, like I was saying before, I mean, I just try to be grateful that this didn't happen, 20 years ago or 30 years ago or something, because it would have been just utter torture. I mean, think about not just things like Zoom, but, even something like the telephone. I mean, when I was a kid, it's like, you didn't make long distance phone calls. They were incredibly expensive, not even as a kid, even as an adult, I mean, you could spend $100 on a single long distance phone call.
Yes.
Whereas now, we all have these
free.
cell phones. They all have these flat rate plans, and you can call anywhere, anytime.
And
or
you
you can
Skype
use things,
and
or you can
Messenger,
use Skype and Zoom and all FaceTime and stuff like that. So you can communicate with people. And no, it's not the same as being in person, obviously, and it's not physical contact or face-to-face contact, but it's
thank
something.
God we have.
Yeah, it's something. So like, you're not just stuck all by yourself, or just you and your kids or your family,
Yeah.
and you can't see or talk to anybody. That's not the case.
You don't know what's going on, and oh my goodness, that would be bad. So
that would be real bad.
We do have things to be grateful for. That is for sure. Sometimes it's hard to remember, but we absolutely do. And gosh, Jonathan, it's been so good having you. I think we're getting close to the end here, but I do want to remind people again that very, very soon they can hear you every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern time on your new radio broadcast, Close to Zero. It's going to be very, very exciting, and I can't wait to listen in. Now, what are you going to be
started?
Now? Your title, Closer to Zero, obviously is the same title as your book.
Right.
Are you just going to talk about the subject that you cover in your book? Or
no. I mean, that's one thing I'll talk about. But I mean, I want to talk about a lot of the same stuff we've been talking about here today. And I'm going to have guests, as you do. There's a whole list of people I want to reach out to and try to get on. Very interesting bunch of folks, some of whom I know fairly well, some of whom I don't yet. But just to discuss not just the pandemic, though that is obviously a major topic of any conversation these days, but where we are as a culture, how conspiracy theories, quote unquote, are affecting us, trying to sort out what's true and what's not, what type of, what conspiracies are real and what aren't, and just sort of a general overview of our culture, where it is now, our civilization such as it is, and how we think about it. So that's sort of my general broad topic, but it'll be a little sexier than that. We'll get a little more specific than that.
Oh, that's cool.
I can't wait. I think it's going to be great. So it's going to be called Close to Zero, which also, as you said, is the name of the book. So there you go.
So and do let me know, when the book is getting ready to come out, and I will definitely announce it on my show as well. You'll be hopefully already broadcasting by then, so you can talk about it on your own show, but I'll be happy to put it out there. I know there are a lot of people interested in checking it out once they're able to.
I sure hope so.
Oh, I think so. Much. Yeah. I'm digging into it now, so I'll read the rest of it and get back to you on it. But I'm sure I'll probably have some more questions, but I can do those over Messenger. And I got to have you back on again sometime.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love to.
All right. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Renee. This has been great.
Thank you. And I hope everybody will join me next week for another edition of Night Vision. Next week, it's going to be Ladies' Night. I'm going to have Carol Carl and Tracy Austin, KGRA's own lovely colleagues of mine. And we're going to be talking about the history of cryptids and that research and how that developed and what's going on with that. It'll be interesting to see what those ladies have to say. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Please be safe. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.